joint forces inflict direct losses and casualties among the rebel militia in different areas in Hodeidah. Houthi rebels prepare lists of Yemenis to blackmail their families. Angry rallies in Taiz against increased crime rate and security unrests. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. Dead and wounded among Houthis in the bombing of barracks, reinforcements in Hodeidah. Today, numbers of Houthi militia members were killed and several others wounded as their violations of the ceasefire on the western coast fronts continue. Joint Forces media reported that Iranian-backed militia tried to target advanced positions on the frontiers of the airport and El Saleh Hodeidah using mortars and machine guns. Joint Forces responded to fire source and directed focus strikes, inflicting direct hits on the targets northeast of the airport and behind the College of Engineering, after carefully monitoring the movements of their members. Also in south of the city, Joint Forces forced Houthi reinforcements to retreat in Beit al-Faqih. Units of the Joint Forces secured El Jah and caused direct casualties among the militia, which forced them and withdrew. In Ma'rib, government forces backed by national resistance recapture El Abyad Mountain and El Mushayrif frontier. Today morning, government forces carried out an attack on Houthi sites. Sources stated that battles fought by the army backed alongside the national resistance ended with the death of a number of Houthis and the recapture of El Abyad Mount and nearby sites. In the same context, artillery of the government forces launched multiple strikes targeting militia groups and gatherings that were held up in the trenches of one site. These victories come within the continuous battles waged by the government forces and the resistance in El Mushayrif, frontier between Ma'rib and El Bayda. Houthi rebels' terrorist machine continues to crack down Yemenis from all spectrums. This brutal crackdown targeted not only people under their control, but seems to have reached Yemenis in diaspora in an unprecedented step. The militia started making lists of citizens outside Yemen as to know their opponents in order to file fabricated accusations against them. More on this story is within this report.
The crime of Houthis have crossed all boundaries. This is evidenced in Yemen, especially in the Houthi-controlled parts of the country, where there are already 20 million on the brink of a disaster. The Houthi militia, in a new draconian measure, asked officials in the districts and in the villages under their hold to list Yemeni expatriates who left the country. The rebel militia asked officials to prepare lists including name of the expatriates, their destinations, addresses and the years they will spend outside the country. The Yemeni government, on its part, described the new measure by Houthis as an extension of the repression forced upon the people of Yemen by those rebels. Officials in the government said that the Houthis are following a policy of retribution against Yemeni people who are unluckily under their grip. The rebellious militia, backed by Iran, looks at blackmailing expatriates through leveling pressure on their families and through threatening them by confiscating their properties, claiming that they are refusing to side with them and are supporting the national forces instead. The Houthi crackdown is not new. Same suppressive action was made before, especially with Yemeni expatriates in the United States. Houthis threatened to punish expatriates' relatives and to seize their properties in Yemen unless they give donations for Houthis' activities. Alarm was raised in light of these steps taken by Houthis. Human rights activists warned that any abuse to Yemeni expatriates would hammer the last nail in the coffin of the Yemeni economy, because the exchanges sent back home by those Yemenis abroad are the last window of hope for those remaining inside the country. This window for money helped the country to avoid the scare of famine for 6 years of war, when there were no salaries paid, coupled with a decline of economy, a depreciation of the local currency, and a halt in all exports and other resources that have been used to pump up the treasury. Lastly, It appears that neither those who are under the Houthis nor those who are outside as expatriates can skip the fatal machine of Houthis rebels.
In Taiz, hundreds of citizens came out in rallies that roamed the city's streets, denouncing the inaction of the civil and military authorities in front of the security chaos that the city has been experiencing for years. Today's rallies come in light of the repeated attacks on citizens' rights in the city by overtaking people's lands, as the military and police forces are accused of doing such acts, and called on to stop repeated acts of assassinations in the city's streets. In line with that, members of the parliament requested President Hadi to form a committee to investigate violations and security unrests in the city.
People of Taiz today came out heartbroken by what happened yesterday, as we are calling on the leadership and the security committee for the arrest of all the wanted men without exceptions, because they are more dangerous to Taiz than the Houthi militia. The army must arrest and hand over the wanted person to special authorities and give them a fair trial. Blood is spilled in the city, attacks on lands and properties of the state and people. We are requesting security and stability in the city. We hold them responsible as crime in the city has increased. Looting, aggression and property robbing. We demand from each official to take responsibility.
Youth can be a positive force for development when provided with the knowledge and opportunities they need to thrive. In 1999, the General Assembly endorsed that 12 August be declared International Youth Day to promote better awareness of the World Programme of Action for Youth. While the youth around the globe celebrate this day, Yemeni youth positive force and aspiration seem to have been ravaged by the war and curbed by Houthi militia violations. This report has more details.
Yesterday, the world celebrated the International Youth Day. The occasion is celebrated on the 12th of August of each year to focus on the international community's attention on youth issues as they are considered as part of the society. Youth are half of the present and the whole future, as nations rely on them to build and develop the world. This occasion comes as the youth of Yemen are suffering from poverty, hunger and unemployment, especially after payrolls cut off and the lack of job opportunities. And when some Yemeni youth find a simple source of income by working as a taxi drivers in an attempt to survive and support their families, yet it does not cover the basic life needs, especially with prices manipulation and the shortage of oil products that paralyzed traffic. But this has become difficult in a country suffering hardship under the conditions of war and the militia's targeting by pushing them to death in its absurd war that did not serve anyone but the corrupt and caused the loss of an entire generation struggling for a living. Observers consider that the youth under the authority of the militia are abandoned as a prey to racist ideas imported from Tehran, so that some get indoctrinated with religious ideas that deepen the gap between the members of society. This is reflected in the form of crimes committed by these individuals against their families after their return from the Houthi front, where their brains have been brainwashed by their propaganda, which destroyed all the bonds of relations among families.
Already suffering grievously under nearly 7 years of war, many thousands of Yemeni professors now face destitution as their salaries have gone largely unpaid for years. Such a thing has made some of those academics look for other sources of income to help them survive with their families. The following report tracks the pain of university staff while trying to secure a good life in the time of war.
Already suffering grievously under 6 years of civil war, thousands of Yemeni state university staff now face destitution as their salaries have gone largely unpaid for years. The immediate reason for this is the Houthi rebels' orchestrated policy to make the entire country starve by refusing to pay the salaries under the pretext that the country is at war, while they spend excessively on arms and military logistics. What made it even harder is the decision made by the internationally recognized government to shift Yemen's central bank out of Sana'a to Aden, the temporary capital where the government is based. Underlying the bank's move to Aden is a struggle for legitimacy between the two sides. The result is deepening economic hardship of 20 million Yemeni people already need some form of humanitarian aid, according to UN estimates. I sold everything. I have to cover the rent, the price of the children's school and food. I have nothing left to sell, said one academic working in Sana'a University. Salaries have become a playing card in the war and no one cares about the fate of people who die of starvation every day, added another academic from Hodeidah University. The administration in Aden says it had to move the bank because the Houthi rebels had looted the funds to pay soldiers and fighters waging war against it. The crisis has affected thousands of university staff across the country, a source in the Civil Services Ministry said. In the struggle for legitimacy, both sides appear keen to deprive the other of any mantle of truly national authority which paying salaries across the battle lines would confer. Meanwhile, some university staff have regularly suggested the payment of salaries is not to be politicized. In the end, the government has promised to pay salaries to public servants even in the main population areas, which are mostly in Houthi rebels' hands. Yet, it is unclear when such government promises to crystallize and that Yemenis can no longer wait for a solution.
Coming next. Despite being crushed, Yemeni women are determined to survive.
ثالثتي على منطقة الروضة استهدف الأطفال الأبرياء اللي يلعبوا في الشارع يدعي للسلام يقول له للسلام يقتل أطفالنا يقاتل أطفالنا الأبرياء.
أنا قلت افتجعت ولا أقول معي واحد صاروخ ثاني طلعت البيت حقنا عشان ألعب أنا وأصحابي والصاروخ انطرح.
Welcome back. Since Houthi rebels seized the capital Sana'a in 2015, human rights violations have been committed on a daily basis. Such violations received local, regional, and international condemnation. These violations have reached their climax with targeting women, neglecting all social and traditional norms that the Yemeni society prides on, especially with regards to treating women decently. This report has more on this story.
Since the Houthi militia seized the Yemeni capital Sana'a in 2015, they turned the entire country into a collective prison. This primitive group not only killed thousands of innocent civilians, but also the social structure of the Yemeni community. Women, fragile humans in a hugely conservative society, did not escape the sophisticating wheel of this backward militia. In an unprecedented step against women, the Houthi militia has informed the owners of commercial centers and pharmacies of the necessity of laying off female workers to prevent mixing and behavior contrary to the Houthi identity. Another incident of this militia violating the rights of women took place last week when the Houthi militia raided dolls displaying women's clothing in Sana'a, claiming that they were attractive idols, and imposed restrictions on the fashion of university students and transformed girls' schools into private schools for boys.
أنا مأدبة من قبل ما أعرفه جالس أنت والأواني
The bullying of Houthis against women did not stop with that. Recently, extremist militia elements attacked billboards related to the wedding and beauty sectors, such as wedding halls and women's hairdressing salons, and blackened the faces of the pictures on the banners. Human rights reports indicate that there is a large percentage of small businesses led by women have been suspended for violating the militia's new religious identity, which has recently been imposed. In recent years, it has prevented females from working in public parks and has practiced violations of workers in humanitarian and development institutions and incited violence against them in mosques as they claim they are soft, intelligent tools. The partial ban on women from work drew angry reactions in Yemeni society, and activists considered them to be more terrifying films than what ISIS did in Iraq and Syria, in crimes of terrorism invisible to the world. Activists on social media said that not allowing women to work in private facilities is black terrorism. The Houthi militia violations against women's rights seems to continue as far as they grip on power. For how long would this last? It's hard to tell. Shaza Abdelbaei, Yemen Today.
The war in Yemen has affected all aspects of life, especially the economic situation. Shahira is one of thousands of lives of Yemenis who try to cope with the hardships of life in spite of everything. More details are on this report.
It is her daily habit to go to the place where she practices her craft and displays her products at a shopping mall in Aden. Shahira is a Yemeni old lady who is good at recycling materials into new ones. She shows all her crafts she has in recycling these items, which represent the Yemeni culture and at the same time keep the environment clean.
I started working in this craft 16 years ago. I am a retired teacher. I started bit by bit until I was able to do these items. They were then for a normal value because everything was cheap. I was buying things in reasonable prices and then I was adding the value of my work.
Shahira did not give up in the face of cruel conditions in her country, although she was close to the brink of poverty. With a strong determination to keep going, she was able to continue her message in order to secure a good life for her family.
I earn the living of my family. I have one daughter and one son. This business plus my pension could support them. There is too the rent of the place and the money I pay to buy the material. Surely I am consumed.
The Yemeni lady set a good example of a woman that strives hard to get on with humble materials in harsh conditions.
I do this work in my space time. It is hard to do nothing in your space time. I do that despite my old age. Thank God, age has nothing to do with the mind that thinks and the hand that work.
Shahira displays many different handmade items that are highly accepted.
I am proud to know someone such as Shahira. She did not give up to retirement by staying home. She made herself a tried. High prices are the difficult things that I face. High prices came suddenly as if they were a virus. We cannot buy anything. Whatever we buy for the material goes back to our basics.
This spectacular Yemeni lady, Shahira, with her smile on her face, gives the people in Yemen an example of how to persist on despite of all the difficulties.
In Ma'rib, the central bank branch launched a campaign to close violating and unlicensed money exchange stores. In various areas of the city, the central bank closed up to 51 exchange stores in the districts, as measures taken by the bank to limit manipulation of exchange rates. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Joint forces inflict direct losses and casualties among the rebel militia in different areas in Hodeidah. Houthi rebels prepare lists of Yemeni expatriates to blackmail their families. Angry rallies in Taiz against increased crime rate and security unrests. That is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.